today's breaking news.
We start with breaking news. A spokesman for the Madison County Sheriff's Office is discussing the department's investigation into a deadly shooting involving Madison police.
Let's listen in right now.
First, I want to say thank you for everyone for coming out today. I want to give you a brief statement on the Sheriff's Department's investigation and the direction that it's going in. First off, on Sunday, October the 27th, Madison police were dispatched to a suspicious person call in front of Planet Fitness on Highway 72 West in Madison. The call ended in an officer-involved shooting, and the Madison County Sheriff's Office was requested to investigate the case. A citizen called 911 at 4:40 p.m. saying that there was a red and white van in front of Planet Fitness, and the occupants of the van have been inside the gym taking pictures and asking inappropriate questions. The first officer arrived 3 minutes after the call was made and approached the passenger side of the van, where 39-year-old Dana Fletcher was sitting in the door, open. Mr. Fletcher and the female in the driver's seat were uncooperative with the officer, and the officer saw Mr. Fletcher reach between the seats toward a gun. Other officers arrived a short time later, and a struggle ensued with Mr. Fletcher in an attempt to get him out of the van. Officers were able to safely remove the uncooperative female and an 8-year-old child from the van, but Mr. Fletcher refused to leave the van. A police canine was used in an attempt to disarm Mr. Fletcher, and another officer used a less than lethal taser, but it was not successful. Mr. Fletcher stepped from the van, pointed the gun at the officer, and 2 officers fired their weapons. Officers attempted first aid, but Mr. Fletcher was pronounced dead at the scene. Officers recovered the firearm from Mr. Fletcher's hand after the shooting. Now, as a part of normal procedure, Madison Police Department requested an outside agency, the Madison County Sheriff's Office, to respond and investigate the case. Our investigators processed all evidence at the scene, reviewed all body cam and business videos, and have interviewed all witnesses as a part of the investigative process. The Sheriff's Office has concluded its portion of the investigation and turned all available evidence and materials over to the District Attorney's Office for further investigation. However, there is still some evidence that must be analyzed and processed by the State Department of Forensic Science. And this is a very important part of this case. To protect the integrity of the investigative process, the Madison County Sheriff's Office will not publicly release any evidence related to this case, nor can we. We are confident the District Attorney's Office will review the case and the evidence in its entirety in the same manner they review all cases to reach an accurate finding. That is pretty much the statement that we are going to give you today. There's some other things here that I want to relay to you about the case. A search warrant was conducted on the van itself after the shooting occurred. Not only the weapon that Mr. Fletcher had in his hand, there was another weapon inside the vehicle itself. So there was 2 weapons recovered from the van, one off of Mr. Fletcher, one from inside the van, and they both were registered and purchased by the driver of the van. And that concludes the statement. Do y'all have any questions that I possibly could answer? If so, I will.
Sheriff, can you tell us what weapons were recovered, what kind they were, if there was caliber, that sort of thing, on any guns?
Not at this time.
No, ma'am, not at this time on the caliber.
You said they were the driver, so they were his wife's weapons.
The driver of the van, the weapons were registered to her.
Can you clarify? So we've asked Madison Police if they can tell us if the 5 officers are still on administrative leave, and they've told us they can't release that because the Sheriff's Office said it's part of the investigation. How is that a part of the investigation? That
is part of Madison City and the City of Madison Police Department. That is their administrative. That is something you will have to ask them. We are strictly over the investigation of this case to find whether there was probable cause of the shooting itself.
So you all have not instructed them not to release that information because that's what they told us?
No, ma'am. That is the department.
Sheriff, can you walk us through the moments between where it says Fletcher reached between the seats for a gun and then officers arrived a short time later? Did the officers on the scene step away at that point, or did they engage Mr. Fletcher? What was the nature of that?
They engaged Mr. Fletcher and gave lawful commands for him to exit the vehicle numerous times. He did not, and it was sort of a standoff at that point. So I'll leave it at that, and the other officers came and we engaged the van.
At what point did they decide to subsequently engage? Was there a number of officers? Was there a factor that led into that interaction?
There were lawful commands. There was less lethal force issued on Mr. Fletcher that were not successful. I think the safety of the driver of the van and the child was at play to try to get them to safety before they engaged to try to get him out of the van.
Is that why the less lethal force was used?
Yes, sir.
initially?
Yes, sir.
Sheriff, you said no evidence is going to be released during the investigation. So after the DA's office reviews it, could we see body camera images or stills?
Let me explain this part that I hope I can make this clear. I've tried to make this clear for the last week and a half that we've been working this. When we investigate a case and we take evidence, that is our work product. We cannot release evidence to a case to the public, okay? Nor can we release the evidence or the video involving, in this case, that is the City of Madison's property, okay? Meaning they have the say-so whether they're going to release it or not. So after we present our case to the DA's office, the DA's office makes his findings, and I'm sure that they will absolutely investigate, look at this from head to toe and to make a proper finding. Then the only thing that the media can do is to contact Madison and the city police department to find out what they plan on doing with it, because it's not our job to release their property.
Can you explain maybe what these inappropriate questions is such a broad term, what they were, and if both the man and the woman were asking the questions?
I'm not aware of the details of the questions. That would be something the investigators had put in their supplement in their report that I do not have in my statement. But it was enough to have someone call in to address the suspicious vehicle in the parking lot.
Where is the van?
Excuse me?
Where is the van?
The van it's impounded in evidence.
Sheriff, I can have a two-part question kind of, relating to that. Do you know what the nature of the call was? What did the officers kind of go there expecting? Can you kind of give us any indication of what the caller actually said, if that makes sense?
I think I said it pretty clear, Ashley, as far as them inside of a business taking photos and asking inappropriate questions. A person called in and wanted a police officer to check that vehicle to find out what their purpose was.
And that was kind of the extent of it?
I think that was the extent, and then it took the course it took.
Gotcha. And can you kind of help, us and folks in the community understand, if you get a call of somebody in a business doing something, I'm sure that police respond all the time to people doing things that bother other people. How does that go from, I guess, needing to get him out of the van? Does that make sense? I think that might help if people could understand that.
Do you want to address it?
Sure.
That's very simple. The initial contact was at the door of the vehicle, and during that conversation, a weapon was seen, and at that point, it jumped up to that level of right there. Just doing the basic investigation, anybody would want to separate someone that they're talking to from a gun that I have seen. Okay, so that's when the whole call changed in my mind.
When the gun showed up?
Yes.
I know a lot of people have been asking on social media why there were 5 officers that responded, and I know it's not your department that responded, but can you maybe explain if all 5 initially responded, or when the weapon was seen where they called for backup, kind of how that all plays into, because I think some people got that.
When Mr. Fletcher did not comply with the lawful commands and there was a weapon seen, obviously that officer is going to call for backup. So I'm sure that's how that went down. That's how it goes down any police agency, for that matter, when you see a weapon. So, the first and foremost is the officer's safety. Plus, you got to remember, Mr. Fletcher had 2 other occupants inside that van, so we didn't know the nature of it. Now, that being said, do y'all have any more questions as far as, and then we need to conclude.
Can you all say how many times he was shot?
There was multiple shots fired. I'll leave it at that, and we'll let the district attorney's office produce their findings.
When the canine and the non-lethal taser was utilized, Mr. Fletcher was in possession of the gun at
Yes,
that
sir.
point, but he had not yet pointed the weapon. at any officers to that point.
He was on his way out of the vehicle with the weapon.
And
Tased.
upon stepping out of the vehicle,
Yes, he was.
had the canine been separated from him?
Yes,
or-
sir.
Okay. Was there understanding that he was potentially complying, or did we just not know? Was it a...
No, he was not complying. Okay?
Was that
All
other
right.
weapon in reach for him? The other weapon you guys were
That was
talking
on my news. I'll clarify some of that because you're probably getting that from the initial release I sent out a week or so ago. This happened in a split second. This went from 0 to 100 in a split second. Where the gun came into play in the taser, as Mr. Fletcher was exiting the van, the taser was deployed. As I listed in my previous news release, it was not effective. He was still able, as he's exiting the van, to raise the gun up, and he didn't just point at an officer. He extended his arm out with the gun pointed directly toward the officer. That's when it turned to a deadly force situation. None of the shots were fired until he had a weapon fully pointed and his arm extended at the police officer.
My question is about that second weapon that was registered to the driver. Was that in his reach?
It was found in the back of the van, is my understanding.
You said this happened in a split second. It happened very quickly. Through the investigation, did you determine whether any officers gave any attempt to de-escalate the situation, or whether any actions may have escalated it? Can you speak to that?
I mean, you want to speak or you may speak? Go ahead. It's in any situation, officers are taught to de-escalate a situation if possible. The initial officer did try to de-escalate. There was the verbal commands that he's given him to comply with him, to separate him from the weapon. That's his attempts to de-escalate. They didn't work, obviously. You talked about 5 officers or so showing up. There were 2 to 3 initially dispatched to the call. One officer, is like it always happens, got there before the others. He had the initial contact, let them know there was a gun, that he was reaching for a gun. That's when everybody else starts showing up, because it's like the sheriff said, it's an officer safety issue. So at that point, they tried hands-on techniques to remove him from the vehicle. It didn't work. They tried 2 forms of less lethal, being the dog, the canine unit, and the taser. Those didn't work before they ever resorted to the deadly force.
Any message to the community since there's been talks of protest?
We ask people not to do that. I mean, we ask people to be patient. Most everyone's been patient with us. We're above board on everything. We've put out all we can put out. I know there's people out there that have put contrary statements to what we're saying. Really, at this point in time, all we can say is you got to trust us, and you got to believe us, and you got to make a decision. We have overwhelming support in law enforcement in general in North Alabama from the community. So we're confident that the community will trust us, and they trust our findings, and they trust our investigators and the process that we have. So we just ask them to continue doing that. Any outside forces from outside of Madison County, please do the same thing. Respect the citizens of Madison County, respect what they want, respect the process and the elected officials and people that they put in place, and cooperate with us.
Listen, thank y'all for coming out. This has been a tough week and a half, not only for both departments, but I'm sure for Mr. Fletcher's family, and just thank y'all. And this concludes our portion of the investigation. We will be turning this over to the district attorney's office, and they will be continuing the investigation on their end. Thank you.
You've been watching a live news conference from the Madison County Sheriff's Office just wrapping up their investigation. They were the investigating body into the shooting death of Dana Fletcher, who was killed by Madison police back on Sunday, October 27th. Sheriff Kevin Turner offering what little information he could about this investigation.
And saying he was looking into whether there was probable cause in the shooting death of Dana Fletcher. And as he recounted what happened on October 27th, he said that a citizen called a police department about 4:40 on the day of the 27th, saying that a person was taking pictures and asking inappropriate questions at the Planet Fitness. And when police arrived, they say that Fletcher and his wife were in a van with their 8-year-old. They were uncooperative. Police were able to, according to the report, remove the wife and the child from the van, but they say Fletcher was uncooperative. They tased him, also used a canine officer to assist in that situation. And they say that's when Fletcher pointed a gun at one of the officers. And they say in those moments, that's when officers fired back. And they also recovered 2 weapons in the car. There certainly was a big push by the community to release that police dash cam video, and at this point we don't know if we'll ever see it.
It doesn't look like it. It said we'll not publicly release any evidence in this case, even though the Sheriff's Office has wrapped up their investigation, turning it over now to the DA. It's still under wraps. They are not going to release any of that evidence, including whatever body cam video there is. Well, we did learn a couple of interesting nuggets. First of all, that you mentioned he did extend his arm out and point a gun, according to sheriff's deputies at Madison Police. That's when they engaged him. And also that there was a second gun found in that van as well. After the incident, they searched the van and found a second weapon.
And this is a story we'll certainly continue to follow for you on air and online. We'll be right back.